Like many Pokémon fans, I contend that the franchise peak was during what I call the Legendary Dragon era, which was when Pokémon had a string of mainline games where the Pokémon on the cover was a Dragon-type legendary. And I wondered how much those cover art legendaries had to do with the overwhelming success and intense nostalgia these 3 generations of Pokémon experience. Legendary Pokémon are the most important Pokémon to nail in terms of design and abilities. If you're giving them a special status as the only one of their kind, then they have to be robust and unique. So why are so many legendary Pokémon Dragon types? Does it speak to a lack of imagination or favoritism of the type? And that Game Freak sees a special prestige that comes with bearing the Dragon type? So let's take a look at the legendary dragons and determine once and for all why they dominate the upper echelons of the Pokémon world. The first and most apparent reason is dragons are super cool to literally everyone from 6-year-olds to furries. There's just something epic and essential about the most important mythological creature ever invented, so it makes sense for such a powerful fictitious force as a dragon to be given a special place among the types. It's a form of respect as dragons play an integral part in Japanese and Western mythologies. They also lend themselves well to a variety of designs. You think that since dragon is the only type to be based on a creature and not a concept, this would lead to similar designs. And while this may be why dragon is such a rare type among Pokémon, it absolutely lends itself to some spectacular monster designs. Able to convey equal parts purity and terror, the design of the legendary dragons is always awe-inspiring. Another reason is that the dragon type is absolutely broken, or at least it was, and it makes sense for the most powerful Pokémon in the game to be the one on the cover and have the strongest type. While they only have one type they're super effective against, their only weaknesses were themselves and ice types, and since dragon type moves on non-dragon Pokémon were incredibly rare, ice was essentially their only Achilles heel. On top of that, they resisted 4 of the most common types, and dragons were positioned as the antithesis to the starter Pokémon, making them an appropriate final challenge for the player to overcome, as they would be hard-pressed if they relied on their starter to fight the various dragon-type trainers and legendaries across the series. So with this overwhelming effectiveness, thematic final challenge motif, and the place that dragons held in both Eastern and Western mythology, it only made sense for the ultimate climactic battle in Pokémon games to be against a dragon. From Emerald to Black and White 2, every single original mainline Pokémon game had a dragon on the front cover. Still, they abruptly stopped and began diversifying the typing of the cover legendaries. While changing things up is good, especially for Pokémon, there was an apparent reason for this. It's not like the legendaries were getting any weaker, they still routinely place in the uber categories for competitive Pokémon, but something has come along to make the dragon types irrelevant. This was the introduction of the fairy type, which sent the entire dragon type into chaos with a new type whose express purpose seemed to be a direct counter to dragon types. While dragon types still dominate the Ubers category, they now have a direct threat that, while not making them irrelevant, has brought them in line with the strength of other competitive types. Now that the undisputed era of the dragons was over, Game Freak was able to justify other types being the cover art legendaries, which has led to some all-time great legendary Pokémon. And it's not like the dragon legendaries have vanished. They have still existed in every generation since 6, and they've recently returned to the title screen with Scarlet and Violet. While I don't think this heralds a return to a new era of legendary dragons, I'm still glad to see that there isn't a ban against making dragon types the cover art Pokémon. So, while the legendary dragon era may be over and looked upon as the golden age of the franchise, were those dragons a considerable part of the franchise's success in this era? Yes, absolutely. In those days, the internet was less prevalent in helping consumers make informed decisions. We were still very much in the times where brand recognition and whatever had the best cover art were the coolest options. So the practical design of having the iconic Pokémon logo with a majestic and mighty creature illustrated on the box would have helped Pokémon sell millions of copies to the new audience that had entered gaming through the Nintendo DS. This was Pokémon's edgy phase, where it was only trying to appeal to young boys, having sharp and imposing dragons overwhelm the viewer on the cover, Pokémon was sending a clear message that this was a cool kids game. Add on top of that the fact that every kid at least knew what Pokémon was, and you'd have a winning formula. Gone were the days when Pokémon tried to have magical and gorgeous creatures to represent their games. Simply compare the original box arts of Gold and Silver to their remakes, and you'll see that the latter have much fiercer poses to align with the more cool kids attitude. This era of Pokémon is looked back so fondly upon because it appealed heavily to the male demographic of Pokémon fans that populate much of the online discussion about this franchise. While legendary Pokémon have had far more exciting designs from the 3DS era onwards, I can't deny the fact that these are the games that brought me into the fold of this childhood-defining franchise.